I had originally had a spinal cord injury in 2007 and became a paraplegic. And then I had a second spinal cord injury, and when I had my second spinal cord injury, things that I used to be able to do fairly easily became more difficult. So I decided at that time that it would be helpful to have a service dog to just help me with my everyday tasks and give me a little bit more freedom. That's another thing that a service dog brings to me, actually, is that routine. I had a brain injury and it makes it a little bit hard for me to organize, and having a service dog kind of helps do that for me. It's much easier for me to organize around him than it is for me to organize around myself sometimes. So.
Well, sometimes what they're doing is they're doing their job even though you don't know it. That service dog is walking around with that person everywhere. Nobody knows that that person, or nobody knows what that person's disability is because it's not visible. You know, we talk a lot in the trade about invisible disabilities and the fact that people are often discriminated against because people can't see that they're ill. But that dog is still on alert the whole time.
So Earl and I and my cat Rex all wake up at about 6 o'clock, and Earl will usually, I'll invite him up to jump into my bed, and the cat's usually already there, and so the three of us will actually all kind of curl up together. I take the meds that I need, and in about an hour I feed him. So he eats his food really quickly, so I don't put it in a regular bowl. I put his food in a Kong toy that is a puzzle toy that he pushes around. So feeding him that way takes about a half an hour, and then put on his leash, and we immediately go outside after that. He goes to the bathroom, and then from there we always play. So we go to the backyard, and he gets about 20 minutes of playing Get It, which is essentially fetch, and runs around the yard. We come back in, and then we're off to our regular morning routine of going for our walk. And then we make all our stops downtown. We go to the produce store, work on him. He pays at the produce store, so we work on that. And then we usually go to the bakery. I get my scone in the morning, and then we head to the library. So that's our morning, what we usually do in the morning. When I had originally been injured in a snowboard accident in 2007, I was a paraplegic. And my life was pretty simple, and I mean pretty easy. I was a ski racer, I traveled a lot. Being in my wheelchair was not an issue for me whatsoever. In 2014, when I was skiing, I had a second injury, and that second injury was a cervical injury, so it involved my neck, which also affected my hands and my arms. And things at that point became a lot different and a lot more difficult for me. So things that I used to do very easily in my wheelchair, like going up curb cuts or picking something up that fell, just became really hard. And it was a struggle sometimes, again, like to go out and to have the motivation to go out and wheel down a cruddy sidewalk. Easy. Yeah, I just didn't really have it. I'd do it, but not very happily. So if I dropped something, somebody else would have to get it, or I would have to struggle to get it. And when you're doing things all the time that are hard, like you're exhausted by the end of the day. Little things wear you out, and little things that wear you out when you're tired means that you get pretty cranky, and your interactions with people are not sometimes as pleasant because you're in pain and you're tired. And then now that I have Earl, I have that motivation to go out. I think too, a service dog does the tasks that you need to have done, and you have a relationship. Like I have a great relationship with Earl, but one of the things that a service dog also does is to be a social bridge. Some people, especially children, I work with kids a lot, when they see somebody in a wheelchair, they see a wheelchair and they look at you as being very different. Not everybody, but you kind of get like two kinds of different. You get the type of different where people just stare at you because you're an anomaly. You get some people that try to be so helpful that they're tripping over themselves and they're actually making things more difficult. And then you get the person that looks at you as being less able or being a little bit frightening or different, that they don't want to interact with you because they're nervous or they don't know what to say or they don't know how to start a conversation. Earl, it seems, completely eliminates that because they no longer immediately see a wheelchair when they see me. They actually immediately see a really handsome dog. And when before a person wouldn't know how to start a conversation with me, not that it's that hard. The way you start a conversation with a person in a wheelchair is the same way you start a conversation with anybody, but it can be a struggle for some people. Now they have an opening, and that opening is Earl.
God bless you and your dog.
I think that service dogs and social dogs and medical alert dogs and therapy dogs and ministry dogs have an incredibly important role in society. We have an incredibly large growing population of children and adults with autism, and social dogs can change their lives and allow people to become functional and to allow them to be able to go out in public and function in public. Service dogs have been around for longer than social dogs, but service dogs that perform a task allow people to be able to go to work, to be able to ride the train, to be able to be integrated in society. Oh, I'm sorry. He's a service dog. He's working right now. Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
A service dog is medical equipment according to the law. Now, granted, none of us who love dogs ever think of them as equipment, and I prefer to think of them as an assistant. But the government, in its wisdom, actually determined that they are medical equipment, and the reason for that is so that people cannot be barred from bringing them where they need to bring them. You know, as I said before, you can't bar somebody in a wheelchair from getting in. You have to accommodate them somehow.
Want to say hello? Say hello. In public, he does a lot for me. And again, being that social bridge is kind of the most important thing that you wouldn't even think would be important. It wasn't why I got a service dog. And it is one of the greatest things about having a service dog is having that social bridge to people and not feeling different, because people they look at you differently now because you have a service dog, not because you're in a wheelchair. So when I was waiting to get Earl, I have a friend who has a service dog who told me that every person with a service dog gets the best service dog in the world. And I think that's true with Earl, and I think it's true with everybody would say the same thing here. When I was going to get a service dog, I wanted to have the ability to have more independence, to pick things up for me, and to do basic tasks that are difficult for me to do. I knew from friends who had service dogs that they also provide companionship, and Earl certainly does that. What I didn't realize was also the impact that Earl would make on other people that I meet in my community, strangers that I meet on the street, and just the relationships that we would form. Like, one of the things that we can learn from service dogs, I think, is acceptance. Service dogs are matched to a person based on the person's needs and based on their disability and their personality and the dog's personality. And that dog does not care if that person is lacking their limbs, if they're in a wheelchair. They don't care if that child has autism and is nonverbal. They're able to recognize, I think, the importance of that person. And you know, they love that person and they accept that person as, from the time they meet, really, and the time they're bonded, as the most important person in their life, regardless of what that person looks like, what that person's behavior is. And I think that dogs, you know, recognize human potential far better than humans sometimes recognize human potential.